Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm my own host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. We're back in Catholic Social Thought, the documentary Heritage, edited by David J. O'Brien and Thomas A. Shannon, published by Orbis, and purchased at Lighthouse Books in Monterey, with the grumpy proprietor not smiling at any of my attempts at humor as usual. And we're in the public domain here. This is all in the public domain. Pope Leo, Rerum Novarum, and we have gone through number 12. We're in 13, and I'm on page 19 of this wonderful volume. Go pick yourself up a volume like this. Orbis Books. Throw some business to the local book dealers, even if they're grumpy, like the guy that runs Lighthouse Books in Monterey. Smile, for God's sake. Anyway, I guess he's always in a bad mood. To me, he looks like a perpetual Metallica concert. Number 13, we approach the subject with confidence, says Pope Leo in Rerum Novarum. In the exercise of the rights which belong to us. For no practical solution of this question will ever be found without the assistance of religion and the church. It is we who are the chief guardian of religion and the chief dispenser of what belongs to the church. And we must not, by silence, neglect the duty which lies upon us. Doubtless, this most serious question demands the attention and the efforts of others besides ourselves, of the rulers of states, of employers of labor, of the wealthy, and of the working population themselves, for whom we plead. But we affirm without hesitation that all the striving of men will be vain if they leave out the church. It is the church that proclaims from the gospel those teachings by which the conflict can be brought to an end, or at least be made far less bitter. The church uses its efforts not only to enlighten the mind, but to direct by its precepts the life and conduct of men. The church improves and ameliorates the condition of the working man by numerous useful organizations, does its best to enlist the services of all ranks in discussing and endeavoring to meet in the most practical way the claims of the working classes, and acts on the decided view that for these purposes, recourse should be had, and in due measure and degree, the help of the law and of the state authority. Number 14, I'm on page 20 at the top. Let it be laid down, says Pope Leo again in 1891, Rerum Novarum, in the first place, that humanity must remain as it is. It is impossible to reduce human society to a level. The socialists, are you getting this? The socialists may do their utmost, but all striving against nature is vain. Where naturally exist among mankind innumerable differences of the most important kind, people differ in capability, in diligence, in health, and in strength. And Unequal fortune is a necessary result of inequality in condition. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or to the community. Social and public life can only go on by the help of various kinds of capacity and the playing of many parts. And each man, as a rule, chooses the part which particularly suits his case. As regards bodily labor, even had man never fallen from the state of innocence, he would not have been wholly unoccupied. You getting this? But that which would have been his free choice, his delight, became afterwards compulsory, and the painful expiation of his sin. Cursed be the earth in thy work. In thy labor thou shalt eat of it all the days of thy life. That's a quote from Genesis. Genesis chapter 3. In like manner, the other pains and hardships of life will have no end or cessation on this earth, for the consequences of sin are bitter and hard to bear, and they must be with man as long as life lasts. To suffer and to endure, therefore, is the lot of humanity. Let men try as they may, no strength and no artifice will ever succeed in banishing from human life the ills and troubles which beset it. If any there are who pretend differently, who hold out to a hard-pressed people freedom from pain and trouble, undisturbed repose, and constant enjoyment, they cheat the people and impose upon them, and their lying promises will only make the evil worse than before. There is nothing more useful than to look at the world as it really is, and at the same time, look elsewhere for a remedy to its troubles. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. That's Pope Leo, Rerum Novarum, numbers 13 and 14, originally published and issued in 1891. I got to preach tomorrow at church. I'm going to preach on Christianity and history. We have our lectionary assigned, Genesis 18. The prophetic intercession of Abraham for Sodom and Gomorrah, and there's a few other. I think Psalm 138 is in there. I think, and reading from Colossians and Luke 11. But I'm going to focus on the Genesis one. But I have a reflection on Christianity and history. Um, Christian history, church history was one of the favorite things I studied in seminary. I went to seminary for 6 years before spending 11 years getting a Ph.D. in public law and American politics. But before that, I was an undergrad at Wayland Baptist University in Hawaii. And I loved going to a private little small Baptist college in Hawaii. It was wonderful. My favorite class I took as an undergrad, all of my education after high school, I went to public school. Besides the first 2 years were private schools. The first 2 years I did community college at Monterey Peninsula College and a public college as well called Defense Language Institute, also in Monterey. And so I did have some public schooling for a chunk of my undergrad, but then that transferred into a private college, Wayland Baptist University in Hawaii, where I graduated with my bachelor's degree before seminary while I was active duty in the United States Navy, even though I had deployed 7 times. Um, it's quite amazing. I ended up getting a day job after the 3 years of deployment, near constant deployment, high op tempo. I had a very high op tempo for deployments in special operations. And I got a job, a day job with the an agency there on the island that you may know of called the National Security Agency. That location was shut down by Edward Snowden later, but that was my day job while I went to college the last year that I worked there in Hawaii. And I was able to finish in a year because I'd had so much college at Monterey Peninsula College and at Defense Language Institute and the numerous CLEP options that Schofield Barracks had offered free of charge in the library. Um, I was able to CLEP out and test out of uh, a lot of credits and for free. And so, but the favorite course I took there at Wayland by Dr. David Howell, my favorite professor there, was church history. And it was the last class I took. In fact, I was already graduated, but I took it anyway because the Navy was going to pay 75% of the tuition. So I was like, yeah, I definitely want to take church history. I had never taken it before. I had all these questions about it and took a 10-week intensive church history course. Our class periods were 4 hours long. I mean, with breaks, 10 weeks. We read Justo Gonzalez's 2-volume story of Christianity, and it was a wonderful time. And I got thinking a lot about Christianity and history. And here's a thought. It's a puzzle. You know, you've heard the saying that love keeps no record of wrongs, but history does. And so the question is, can there really be such a thing as Christian history? Why would Christians be interested in history? Because, I mean, think about it, what it takes to do history. You have to have access to information, records. There's a story to be told and uncovered there. And what I discovered as I was studying church history there at Wayland, and then later when I did the MDiv sequence at Denver Seminary under Dr. Scott Wenig, who was a guest on this podcast, PhD for his PhDs in church history from CU Boulder and English church history. And I had Dr. Bruce Shelley, author of Church History and Playing Language. His PhD is in history from the University of Iowa. Um, what you discover is the sources are never as good as you thought they would be or hoped they would be. It's like, wow, we're left with this to figure out what happened in the past. And the older I get, and the more I see how um, people are, their assumptions are, and I'm including Christians in this. For example, Christians will say, you know, Jesus is coming back. What's the point? You know, we don't need to really be careful about thinking about the future, thinking about what we're doing now will be understood later. And by the way, what records can they use? What records are going to be available? Are we protecting the records? Are we covering things up to make it harder to find out what really happened and what it was really like? And maybe we're using Christian doctrine to do that. Christian slogans. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Well, then how can there be Christian history? The problem is this. Christianity is a historical religion. It's unique among the religions in that it is historical. It depends on accurate history. It's not at war, or it should not be at war with accurate history. But I have to be honest with you, and I hate it when people use that phrase because it's like, well, were you not being honest earlier? Why do you have to announce that you're being honest all of a sudden? It's just a stupid phrase that people have a bad habit of using, and I even slipped into it just then. Um, but when I was in seminary, the churches I was involved with, I think the reason we say I have to be honest with you is because there's so much bull crap out there. And I think people just assume you're just bull crapping them. This is a phrase that's supposed to prompt a little bit more trust because we can understand why you didn't trust. There's so much bull crap out there. But I try not to, unless I'm joking or something, I try not to use that term. And I joke around a lot, so it does come into play. But these churches I was involved with when I was in seminary, the majority of the time, most people had no interest in what I was learning in seminary at all. There's an arrogance that, as I reflect on it, is similar to the arrogance I see with the electorate about politics. And I think it goes something like this. We have a right to vote, and so therefore I'm an expert now. Whatever my opinion is the right answer. And why would I have to think deeply about politics? There's no point. I mean, I have a right. Whatever I put on the ballot is the right answer by definition. It's like people who think that they have a right to buy a gun, and so therefore they're the expert on what gun safety is. And they don't really know. They're not situating themselves in a context of knowledge and tradition where it's like, no, no, you're not an expert. You're actually quite dangerous. And you need to get plugged into a civil society where there's a tradition and you're getting the best of that tradition in order to safely exercise the right. And I would say the same thing about voting. You need to get into a civil society where you're learning and you're insatiably curious about what it means to do this right, what it means to do this properly. And in church, it's the same thing. I mean, I have a right to interpret the Bible, to read it or not read it, and just, it means what it means to me, and that's the end of the discussion. Church history began just shortly before I was born, and the end of church history is when I die. And I've never been that way. I've never been that way. I think it's incredibly arrogant and stupid. And so I came to the task of studying church history just so thirsty, but the sources were so hard. It was so hard for me to realize that the sources are so challenging. They're challenging because they're so bad. I mean, it's sad that we have so little to work with. And we have so little to work with because people are the way they are. They don't care about the future. They don't think about the future. They don't think about, I mean, I'm saying in general, you have exceptions, obviously, which is why we can put anything together, but there's this there's this radical immaturity in people, including from mature people who are actually immature as far as how to help the future. We don't think about it. We think about ourselves. Maybe you think if you're not just constantly thinking about yourselves, you're thinking about your children, which is another way of thinking about yourself because they're a reflection of you. And we don't think about how we're we're going to be presented to the next generation, and we don't think about how we can help make an accurate story for them to benefit from. We don't think about that enough in terms of the preservation of our archives and the carefulness of our thought and understanding, cultivating a life of understanding and virtue. It's not in style. When I say we, I mean, I'm generalizing. Obviously, there's exceptions. I'm not really including myself in that. I'm just saying we to be nice, but I'm not like that. And that's why I feel like I need to say something every now and then. So that's what I'm preaching about tomorrow. And I think it's quite refreshing that the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is in there in Genesis 19, 18 and 19, because it's kind of an embarrassing story. It's it's the Bible has a bunch of stuff in there that's very embarrassing to the people of God, but it's still in there. There's no editing, excising it. It's preserved. And you think I'm kidding? It's not. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1948-ish and following, there was almost a complete copy of the book of Isaiah. The significance of this find is probably the only place on earth that it could have survived besides like Death Valley or something, because it's extremely dry. And the prior to that, the oldest copy of the book of Isaiah was from 800 AD, something like that. But this copy of Isaiah at the Dead Sea Scrolls predated that copy by almost 1,000 years. And they're virtually identical. And when I say virtually, I mean 99%, 99.9% identical. What does that tell you? That tells you that whatever virtues of these people that preserved these texts, they took it very seriously to write down exactly what was said. I'm not saying I understand it. It's quite astonishing to me how that could happen. But what I like about the Bible is from Genesis to Revelation, it does not hold back. It criticizes the very people that are protecting it. And that is unheard of in our human condition. Usually we like to let bygones be bygones. Love covers a multitude of sins, all that crap. But it's embarrassing. The stuff that's in the Bible is embarrassing to the people of God, but it's in there. And what do I get? I think the best explanation for that is the work of the Holy Spirit in preserving. I don't think mere humans could do that. Well, I know you might be on the other side of that, but by the way, I'm not a Catholic. I'm Protestant. I'm reading this because it's a part of church history. It's a part of the tradition, and they have quite a lot to say that I think is important and useful. The next reading that we're going to be doing from this is number 15. We're just going to go straight through. Um, and the next section is called Employer and Employee, which will be very interesting to get into. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. If you got anything out of this, great. Drop me a comment. Feel free to subscribe. Um, Pass it on to your friends. Let other people know about it. Follow us on Twitter. When I say us, it's me. At the Republican Prof, at Republican Prof. Or I'll just see you on the next episode. Or you'll see me, is really what I mean, because I can't see you. Talk to you later. Bye.